One thing that can frustrate people in watercolor is when and how do you go back into a wash? Should you let the wash dry and then go back afterwards, or should you go back into your wash straight away? Because both of these have advantages and both of them also have disadvantages. So it all depends what you want. So before we go into that, let's actually backtrack a little bit to understand the background of this, because it's the background which is actually the most important part. So you've found a subject. You found a subject and you want to paint it. Now, the first ingredient that we have to think about is actually our composition. You need to go back to the composition. We don't need to plan a composition at this point. What I want you just to do is to understand the role of a composition. So a composition is the placement of shape, color, and tonal values in order to guide the eye around the painting in the way the artist wants, to bring out a message, to tell a story, to create some sort of atmosphere, to trigger emotion in the people that are looking at your paintings, whatever your goal may be. Now, with watercolor, one of the main ingredients that we have is water. And one of the most unique characteristics of watercolor is the water, meaning water creates transparency, fluidity, and actually all of the suggested lost shapes that are characteristics of watercolor, and I would say even quite unique to watercolor. So watercolor, the actual water, helps that flow of the composition, because if our goal is to have the eye moving throughout the painting, that's a different kind of flow. We're talking about flow of paint, keeping that transparency, that fluidity up, but also the flow of the eye. The flow of the eye helps the eye move from one shape to another within the painting so that the painting can be experienced by the viewer in a more effective way. So there's two different kinds of flow. Now, what can stop the flow of paint is obviously not enough water or too much heavy paint going back into your washes, which makes your washes heavy and stagnant. They no longer flow. They don't have that fluidity anymore. The second part of it is, how do you break? How do you stop or hinder the flow in a composition? And that too comes down to the same thing. It's same thing, it's stagnation, meaning that the eye can't get past a certain point. Why would that happen? And one of the most important aspects, or the main reasons why this happens, are edges, meaning the outer edge of our shape. The outer edge of our shape being too defined stops the eye, being suggested holds the eye and then lets the eye move on, or no definition at all, meaning a lost edge, and the eye just moves straight through. All right, so edges stop the flow in the composition, just like water stops the flow in the transparency. Okay, the two of them are needed. All right, so that brings us back to the flow, blocking the flow of the paint, blocking the flow of the eye. However, what often happens when people come back in, once the paper's dry, and add a second wash, is they end up putting hard edges everywhere. They end up with every single new wash that they're creating having these hard edges. These hard edges block the eye. They may keep the fluidity, the flow of the paint, but they may block the eye, and then you're basically weakening your own composition. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through a simple subject and sort of show you how these two work in a very simple subject, so that maybe that can help you with your painting. Okay, so here I've got Arches 300 grams. Always like doing basic stuff when you're doing an exercise. That's the way that you get the best results, because there's nothing else to focus on. So let's do one of my favorite subjects. It's a cup. All right, let's just create whatever shaped cup you like, whether it be a nice fancy teacup or it be a big mug, just something basic. But what I'm looking for is something round. Okay, it's the round shape that I'm looking at because I'm wanting to do graded washes. All right, let's do a saucer, and let's put a handle on this. All right, so my light is going to come from the right. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be having my light come from the right, lighting up the right side of the cup, the right side of the saucer, And as the shape moves, as it turns, I'm going to be coming into a mid value and into a darker value, and it's the opposite inside, darker value here, coming to a light value. All right, so my goal at this point is just to throw something on as a first wash, because this whole exercise is actually the second wash. So let's just jump pretty quick into this. Obviously, I'm going to be looking for that flow when it comes to the water, to the watercolor. So even my background's going to be transparent. So it's going to be pale, it's going to be transparent, and it's going to be pretty basic, okay? Because the story's not the background. The story of this little sketch is not the background. You know what it is? It's the light on the teacup. That light on that teacup, which I'm going to make stand out in a pretty basic way, and maintain that fluidity of the paint and the fluidity of the composition. So let's just do this in a pretty direct way. This is just a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of quinacridone violet, quinacridone purple. And the quinacridone purple is actually Daniel Smith, but the burnt sienna is Winsor & Newton. And I only use Winsor & Newton burnt sienna because it's very different from all the other brands. So that's my favorite burnt sienna. All right, let's put some sort of value in here. I love teacups. So if you go onto my channel, you will see that there may be some other subjects of teacups. I just find them so much more interesting to paint than like an apple when it comes to doing an exercise. Now, before I get carried away and I just keep talking, what I'm wanting to do is connect. Remember, we were talking about the composition, and we want, through tonal values, color, and shape, to guide the eye around the composition. So I'm connecting my background and my subject through the shadows so that they're all connected, because we're maintaining that flow. All right, so here we go, keeping some edges so that the subject is visible. So I don't want these hard edges. These hard edges don't suit me. So this is where I would take my brush, I'd wash it out, I'd dry it a little bit, and I would soften the edge. Don't go back into the wash that you've done. Just basically soften that hard edge. Don't use a lot of water to do it, because otherwise the water will come down and actually destroy the washes which are underneath it. Now I'm painting flat, which I don't normally do. That's why you can see the paint puddling a little bit. Ideally, when you're painting, you have your paper sort of inclined on a sort of 30-degree angle would be sort of the best thing. I'm going to have to pull this water off. It's just better for the camera that the paper is flat. Otherwise, I would be painting on an angle. So, but we can get around that because we are we're able to be a little bit more creative. So soften the edge, clean the brush, take the water out, and just soften that edge. Okay, that's what you need to do. Don't go back into the wash. That would be a mistake, because you're just going to mess up the wash. All right, we could let that dry. We could let that dry now, because the goal of this whole exercise is actually, I'm going to add some light there, is actually to see how we can go back in and create a second wash on top of that. So I shall let this dry, and I will come back in a second, and we'll do the next stage. The goal of this exercise is, above all, to see how we can come back in and not break that fluidity of the watercolor and the fluidity of the composition. So let's do that. So I'm going to put the shadow side on, and you're going to see where the problem arises. So let's go for something nice and transparent. So here I'm going to actually come down. If you see all the way down here on my palette, that's my Winsor blue. Very transparent, non-granulating. That's the sort of color that I'm going to want for my teacup. So a little bit of ultramarine blue, green shade as well, so it doesn't granulate, and mixing that with my Winsor blue. For some reason, people don't always or don't often mix blues, but you can obviously mix two blues, two reds, to get the sort of color that you're looking for. So all I'm doing at the moment is just adding that transparent wash on, which is going to create that transparent shadow for my teacup. Now, again, I don't want these hard edges. Let me make them even worse so that they look absolutely uncomfortable. See how that hard edge now just sort of cuts the shape? I no longer have that feeling of depth. That's exactly what I don't want. That's what breaks the composition. This sort of hard edge, when you're wanting the fluidity, you're wanting to see the transition of light, I've just broken it. So what I would do is I'd go back in, wet my brush, and soften those edges. Just go back in and soften them. Don't go back into the rest of the wash. Okay, and you basically paint, soften, paint, soften. You do it straight away. Don't come back in and think, oh, I'll do that later, because later it will be too dry. So let's just keep painting. Keeping these edges soft. Sometimes I will have a hard edge, but not always. All right, a little bit darker down the bottom, bringing some darker shadow just through here, just to create a little bit of depth in the cup. And again, soften the edge. Soften your edges straight away. It's the first thing you should be doing. Put the color on, soften the edge. It needs to be a habit. And that habit, once you've got it, it becomes an automatic habit. So you don't actually have this problem constantly annoying you in your paintings. Okay, I'm going to reduce that light, which will enhance it over here. All right. Let's add a little bit of darker shadow down here. Now this area has dried a little bit, not a lot. It's still wet, but it's a little bit drier than it was 20 seconds ago. So you will see that I'll get some soft edges. Look at that, I've got some soft edges. These soft edges I do want when it's within the shadow, but not on the edge of the shadow. Okay, big difference, very big difference. Not on the edge of the shadow, I want it within the shadow. I hope that's clear. And let's bring the color back to a little bit of a nice sort of brighter blue as we move into the light. Okay, and you can see how it just builds. That light, that hard edge can't stay. Soften it, soften it. Okay, you soften it straight away. Don't wait. There we go. So as you're going to see, you have to play with your edges. You actually have to construct them, particularly if it's a second wash, because otherwise what's going to happen is that you're going to have hard edges everywhere. And they're really not helpful because they stop the fluidity, both of the watercolor and of the composition. So I think you can see from doing pretty much not a lot, I'm getting a nice effect of light. I'm creating soft edges where I want them, hard edges where I want them, and I'm maintaining that fluidity of my subject, but also of the composition. And so my subject is gradually appearing. So I'm just going to keep playing with this one, and I shall say, be careful of your edges. Don't go back into them too much. Understand where your focal point is, and I'll see you next week. Happy painting.